So we'll go ahead and get started, and then as folks join, they can come on in. But good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Beth Schill, and I'm a Senior Manager of Careers in Public Service at the Cawley Education Center. And I've been with Georgetown for, this is my 5th year, and I have a background in doing government consulting, as well as working in think tanks before I came to Georgetown. But I'm happy to talk with you all today about careers in public service. But before I do that, I want to turn it over to my co-host, Tina.
Thanks. I am Tina Gaddy, and I am the Assistant Director for Undergraduate Professional Development in the School of Foreign Service. So I work in the Graduate Career Center, but with the BSFS students specifically, and just working on all things international affairs in different careers. I've been at Georgetown for just over 2 years, and prior to that, I've been in higher education career development for 16 years in different universities. Right before coming to Georgetown, I was at the Elliott School of International Affairs at George Washington University. So I've been in the IA space for quite some time.
So welcome everybody for our first of 8 series on careers in public service. This is a new program that we're offering, so we're eager to get it started and also eager to hear what you have to say. A couple public service announcements for those who joined just in the last few moments. Please make sure you stay on mute as the session is being recorded. Feel free to have your camera on or off at your preference. Either is fine with us. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and then we can go ahead and call on you if you'd like to ask it. Since we're not a huge group today, please feel free. If Tina and I are talking too fast, tell us to slow down. If we say an acronym that you're not aware of, please go ahead and feel free to interrupt and ask questions as we go through our session today. All right, so today, first of all, this is the first session in 8, and really what we're hoping to do today is really kind of go over at the 50,000 foot level, why are you interested in a career in public service? And we're going to basically break down for you what the rest of the series is going to be about, and going through the different branches of government, what the world of DC, state and local government, and then also review some of our common resources that as you begin your exploration in a career in public service that you can use. And these are all things that are helpful you can refer to that might help in future sessions. You don't have to attend all 8. I think you'd gain a lot if you do attend all 8, but you can come and go as you wish. And we'll finally wrap up with just kind of a few tips and tricks for networking in the public service space, because it's a little bit of a different game than and in different industries. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. All right. So part 1, why are you interested in a career in public service? You're all here, obviously, so you're interested. And I think this is really, at its core, what differentiates the public service industry from every other industry. And it really is that connection to the mission of an organization. So when we talk about why you're interested, it's really important that you reflect on your values. What is it that's important to you? What are issues out there in our world that you're passionate about, that you want to help be part of a solution? What are things in our society do you think aren't working that you want to take a chance to correct? Because when you answer those questions about what your own values are and what you're looking for, you can then connect to the mission of whether it's a government agency, a government office, an advocacy organization, a nonprofit organization, you name it. It's that connection to the mission that really differentiates a career in public service from something else. Tina and I have both been in DC for quite a long time, and I can tell you, people don't come to the city to get rich. Not that there aren't rich people in the city, but that is not why people are here. They're here because they want to help be part of the solutions that our country and our world faces. And that isn't always the most lucrative thing. So that connection to a mission is really important. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we move on, but there are a lot of ways to explore what a mission of an organization is. And we're talking more than just, the mission tab in an agency website. We're looking into what are the issues that organizations are exploring. You read about something in the news that's going on in national politics. What's that next layer down of who are the movers and the shakers that are working to get these policies into place? And to that end, we'll go through some of the resources at your fingertips, newsletters, news outlets that we find helpful, media resources, and more that I'd say some of the insiders in our world tend to use for both career options, but then also to get a better sense of what's going on. And similarly, you know, part of this world, in addition to having the mission connection, is politics. Now, maybe you're going to be directly into politics and working for a campaign or working for a congressional office or working directly for the administration. But DC is a one business town, and that business is government. And the way government happens is through politicking, big P and small p politics. So even if you're in, you know, small organizations and nonprofits that are trying to influence policymakers, understanding what the current political situation is, what are current political trends happening, what are key budget issues, where are the appropriation battles happening for who gets what funding, when, where, and how. These are all things that are part of the world of public service that make it just a little bit different than other industries.
Right.
Anything to add, Tina?
I agree completely, and then just putting a bit of a global perspective on it as well. What happens locally, this is also what could happen within international organizations, multilateral organizations, not just other NGOs, as well as international government agencies and organizations that you may want to be involved in. So having a really keen idea of what's happening in news and in the world and your take on that and how you want to impact that will help you make decisions about which government agency or NGO you may be interested in as well.
Thank you. All right, so where can you work in the government? We're going to take it back to, like, you know, your civics classes in high school, and we're going to break it down. Really what we're covering during this series is differentiating between working for the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch, because it is different how you apply for each of the branches, and same with the opportunities that are afforded to you for each of the branches. And then we'll also be touching on the state and local government as well as multinational organizations and what we call the fourth branch of government, which is basically the world of politicking, lobbying, advocacy work, and everything where people are trying to influence the policymakers in these three branches of government. So yeah, going back to basics, 3 separate branches of government, and how you apply is different for each of them. And that's what we will discuss in future weeks. We won't get into so much of the detail today. All right, so at a high level, starting with the legislative branch, over the next, I think it's next 2 weeks from now, we'll be talking about working on the Hill. How do you go about getting internships? What do those entry-level staff assistant and legislative assistant jobs look like, and how can you be a successful applicant? What does it mean to work for campaigns? We're in a little bit of a lull right now, but the past 2 years, that has been a major point of entry for a lot of students interested in working in the legislative branch, has been working or volunteering for campaigns. Another big thing is working for the DNC and the RNC and their affiliated organizations. You can add in the Libertarian Party and the Green Party and, you know, additional political parties, but like working for the party systems and how that influences as well. Working in the legislative branch also covers working on what we call adjacent Hill agencies. So these are agencies that were founded by Congress, acts of Congress. That includes the Library of Congress. They also do a lot of really, really interesting policy research. So anytime a legislator is interested in understanding more about a particular policy or the history of a policy, they go to folks at the Library of Congress Congressional Research Services to learn that. The Government Accountability Office, it's seen as a watchdog agency for the federal government, and they oversee federal government. If you find an agency is in the Washington Post for a bad reason, it's typically because GAO has put a report out. You know, usually they focus on issues of waste, fraud, and abuse, but that's what they do. They do a lot of also really, really cool research, and you get a broad exposure to a lot of different agencies. So we'll cover that in a couple weeks, and that's the legislative branch in a nutshell. And we'll also cover things like what type of resume do you need? If I am of the opposite political persuasion from my representative, can I still intern for them or work for them? How do I get into a committee job versus a staff office job? And also working in Washington, D.C. versus the home district offices. So we'll kind of get into some of those topics as well.
So the next one we're going to go over as well is the judicial branch. And so this can include any appointed positions that you'll see, as well as those who may be interested in going on to law school after you finish your undergraduate degree. And that will involve you working in clerkships or as a paralegal. A lot of those positions are generally given to first and second year law students. However, there may be some opportunities for you to gain some experience that could be transferable or that will help you make decisions if you are considering law school as an option. This is also where some other roles will come into play as regarding lobbyists and other things like that. And so this, when we go over this, will help you to understand if law school is, if you're thinking law school, what does that look like for you in terms of options there? So other things within the Department of Justice, the court system, will give you an overview of what that means working in public service in that arena too.
Also, hot tip, I just saw a posting for an internship program at the U.S. Supreme Court, and it is open to undergraduates. So I'll be putting that in my next newsletter, and I will tell you how to get on that newsletter further on in today's presentation. But I literally just saw that before we came online today.
And one other place, so when we think of government agencies in this arena, one that often gets overlooked is the U.S. Patent and Trade Office. So if you have an interest there, they do tend to do our internships with law school students. However, there are opportunities for undergraduate level students in the U.S. Patent and Trade Office as well. It may seem boring. I promise you it is not. It has more of a direct line to the White House than a lot of people understand. So we can get into that too.
Okay. So the executive branch. Now, a lot of y'all may think of the executive branch as just the White House, and that is the case. Like, yes, it does include like working directly at the White House. These would be a lot of the appointed positions or some of the offices that report directly to the President of the United States. But that also includes all of the government agencies. Those are all technically part of the executive branch. And while you might be a career civil servant, you ultimately serve at the pleasure of the president. So when we talk about executive branch, we're talking a 2 million workforce population of hundreds of agencies. So, you know, it's a very broad area of opportunity. And so when we talk about the executive branch, which is going to be next week, we'll talk about the appointed positions. This was something this time last year when we were getting close to election, a lot of students were interested in like, oh, if there's a new administration, how can I get appointed and what does that mean? We also primarily, however, talk about the civil service. And, you know, a lot of what we see has to deal with what we call the competitive service. And this is where you have to go through the USA Jobs portal. And there's a very specific set of things that you have to do to get into the competitive service. And it's that way because they want the executive branch to look as diverse as the American people. And so a lot of the laws that are in place that make it a bit of a hassle to get through the hiring process are that way to ensure that it is as fair and as equitable as we potentially can make it. So that's a lot of what we'll discuss next week is a competitive service and what that looks like and how to read a job description on USA Jobs. What is USA Jobs? You might hear this thing called a federal resume. We'll touch on that. We'll talk a little bit about accepted service. So these are like hiring exceptions. You typically see these for fields like computer science or STEM fields, or if there's specific, national emergencies in a specific area, they might make an exception to hire people. So like I could see DHS having some exceptions for hiring folks that would work with the current refugee situation and trying to help people get through the refugee paperwork processing and roles in that area. The last area that we'll cover next week is the intelligence branch. And while the intelligence branch is part of the executive branch, they also kind of operate in their own little world. And I say that with a lot of warmth because there's some wonderful agencies and wonderful civil servants that work over there, but because of the nature of the work that they do, because of the sensitive information, the whole hiring process for intelligence agencies is different. And to that end, we'll also touch briefly on what many of you have heard about the security clearance process and just some high-level things that you need to be aware of if you're pursuing a job that requires a security clearance. All right.
So we can get into what we call the fourth branch, and this is I'm going to give Beth credit for sort of coining the fourth branch of government, and these are all the agencies that, or affinity groups and advocacy groups that work on a tangent with the other three branches of government, and these are contractors, consulting firms. A lot of students go into management and federal consulting, and working in federal consulting, this is what that is. And so, we can get into the details of this later on in the series, but for federal consulting, a lot of times you would be working for an outside firm, but still be placed in a government office. So you would be doing similar work to what other people would be doing at the IRS or another agency, but working directly for the consulting firm and making recommendations there. There are other government relations positions and government advocacy positions within the private sector or within tech. A lot of those are really small offices and really small teams, but this tells you a bit about how to get involved in that arena. And then there are advocacy groups and nonprofits and NGOs that also make up the other part of the fourth branch of government. If you had more to add.
And I
And
think this
then
one's yours too.
I got it. Okay. And then we get into the multinational organizations and multilateral and international organizations. This would include the World Bank, IFC, UN. These are organizations where, generally speaking, everyone who's involved with them has to be a citizen of a member nation. And so that would include most of the nations where our students hail from. And then they do a lot of work on development, economics, public health, international development, anything that you see. So with COVID, there were specific teams placed not just on the global health priority of COVID, but the impact that that had on food sustainability in member countries, on the economy of all the member countries, on just general public health and how we are spreading the disease or trying to control it on a global stage. So this was an area where you saw the entire world come together to try to minimize the impact. We're still working on it, so that's how you can become involved there. And then outside of the IOs and multilateral organizations, there's also opportunities to work within embassies. There's obviously U.S. embassies that are a part of the State Department, but also working for foreign embassies. And this is helpful for students who may come from another country but want to do some embassy work here. You could work within your home embassy based here in D.C. or in New York, and finding different opportunities in diplomacy. Business development is huge within the embassies because it's a lot of what they do, both U.S. and abroad, or yeah, both U.S. and abroad.
All right. So the next step, we're going to talk a little bit about, okay, so we just threw a lot of information at y'all about what we're going to cover. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, but where do I start? So what we're going to go through for the next little bit is some of our go-to resources. So say you're going to come and do a 30-minute session with me or Tina. These are some of the resources that will probably show you right away, and we'll go ahead and mail this out to all of you afterwards, this presentation, so you have the links. But these are some common resources that we use. The first is, I have, feel free to put questions in the chat if you have anything, so please interrupt us. Every week I send out every other week, a government, nonprofit, and education newsletter. And this is basically the world of public service. This includes postgrad service opportunities like the Peace Corps and Teach for America. It includes multinational organizations and international opportunities. We haven't seen so much of that in the last year or so for obvious reasons, but I'm starting to see some firms starting to pick up on some international opportunities. Tina and I work together on populating this. We include tips, tricks, upcoming events, upcoming major deadlines, whether it's for, like, say, the State Department or the FBI, or we have, like, the deadlines coming up for various fellowships, Wrangell, Pickering, etc. And we also have jobs and internships, and it tends to be for, undergrads, graduates, and maybe for up to, like, a few years out from school. So it's really these entry-level opportunities. And there's a link here on our website. If you click on it, can you see this all right, the website?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
So it's on our Cawley Career Education News Center under About Us, our industry email letters, and you can sign up here. Or you can also, you should get a weekly email from the Cawley Center. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can click on that Update My Preferences and sign up for the industry newsletters there. There's also one for, like, pre-law, tech and health, So there's more than just the government, nonprofit, and education one. We also have, and we'll take turns going over this, we have resources all on our website, Careers in Public Service. A good picture of Jack. So, like I was saying, first of all, we have some really cool panels that we did over summer 2020, and we do try and put those videos online as we have them that are fun to listen to. You know, if you're just like cleaning your room or whatever, doing your laundry and you want to listen to something, it's great to listen to our alumni experiences. But on this page are 6 different buttons. Education, especially in the realm of public education, that is considered public service. We have what are called our federal hiring videos, and these are videos specifically about the executive branch and how do you get started with that. Like if you're like, oh, I want to work for the State Department or the Treasury or the IRS or patent, where do I get started? My first thing I point every student to is watch these videos at your leisure. All together, it's maybe a little bit over an hour, but they're broken up into like 10 or 15-minute segments, really helpful. Page on government. A lot of you might be interested in this page. It is a ton of information on some of our favorite go-to sources. So like information gathering. We talked a little bit before about like understanding what's going on in the world of government. One of my favorite websites is really wonky, but I love it. I used it in past jobs all the time. Federal News Network. It's a radio. They have a radio station. You hear them on WTOP sometimes, but it goes over all this stuff that like if you're in the world of government, these issues are important to know about. And it goes over everything. Like some of their stuff under workforce management or pay and benefits gets to like what's going on in terms of your benefits package that as a potential government employee might be helpful to know. And then it also talks about like some of the top things that are going on. So like right now the big thing is everybody's getting mandated. How does that look like for a federal employee? What does it mean? But that's one of my favorite websites. But going back to that, we also talk about making connections, potential agent associations you can look at, and then especially on this page, we do get into some of the weeds on like what an application for federal government means, including some additional websites. GoGovernment.org is another amazing website to go to if you're just getting started in government. It's meant for people who are exploring careers in government that have never really worked in government before. They have career guides based on like what your background is, tips on how to apply, some of which we will go over in subsequent sessions, and the benefits too. So there's a lot of benefits to public service in the federal government. Also on this page, we have the careers in government relations, which kind of includes like your advocacy firms, you know, everything from, you know, you think of your big lobbying firms like the NAACP or the AARP or the NRA to like your small little niche firms that try to influence policy. Careers in nonprofits, this is also another big one because this is where we put think tanks, because think tanks are technically nonprofits. And right up here at the top, we have a number of links to various DC nonprofit organizations, as well as lists of think tanks, because there's a lot out there, especially in DC or New York. So these are all pages that you should bookmark. And then last, we do have a page on careers in intelligence. Please, if you're interested in the intelligence careers, you can always talk to me or Tina about it, but there's about as much information as you are going to find publicly available on these two websites, intelligence.gov and intelligencecareers.gov. They have a lot of information on here if those things are interesting to you. We also have a cool video at the bottom with Michael Cassidy, who's a coach at the Graduate Career Center at SFS. And he gives a great overview of like what does it mean to work in this field and what the different agencies are and kind of their, I'll say personalities, as it were, their organizational culture. But this is all on our Cawley career page. You can see it's careers in public service. It's under our industry guide tab. And now, Tina, if you wanted to go ahead and take over and do the international opportunities.
Absolutely. So for internet, and I don't know if I can
let me see
that too.
If I stop, can you do it now? Share your screen? Or wait.
No, if you would just pull it back up and then go ahead and just click
sure.
it, that'd be great. Sorry.
No. All good. All right, so international opportunities.
So Obviously, there is information on the Cawley website about how to volunteer, teach, and work abroad. And this includes organizations like the Jesuit Volunteer Service, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, things like that, and how to get involved with those organizations, what it really means to volunteer. And from a government perspective, if we're looking at Peace Corps, what that looks like. Of course, in the last year, all the Peace Corps volunteers were brought home, but this will get into how you can get new opportunities with them and what they're doing right now. The There's information here from the Office of Global Services, from different groups that you can sort of go through, and then specifically the ones that I mentioned, I would suggest clicking on those and learning more about the opportunities. We do a lot of work with them that you'll learn a lot about that will be helpful, and also utilizing different resources. Obviously, we always say go to Handshake for information, but there are a lot of other websites as well, from a nonprofit and international realm, including Idealist, which has really great opportunities for nonprofit organizations, as well as a ton of other search um, websites that you can look for different opportunities there. Can we go back to the multinational? So again, we talked about multinational, and here in this guide, it tells you all about the intergovernmental organizations and NGOs, non-governmental organizations that we work with and that a lot of our students have been working with, and how to get involved in that, especially because multinational organizations, generally speaking, want applicants who are at a graduate degree level or a PhD level. However, there are opportunities for undergraduate level students, and that includes getting information from organizations like or websites like DevX, the Society for International Development, um, chapter, the NGO Global Network, um, and all the other UN professional associations as well. So you'll get this information here. It's like drinking out of a fire hose when you're sort of clicking through all of these. However, I think that if you take your time and sort of do more of a focused overview, so you're focusing just on multinational, you can go over all of those instead of trying to absorb all of this at once. You'll find it very helpful. Um, can we go back out? Sorry. Yep. And then the final thing in terms of other resources too, we know we have newsletters, but Beth and I both have Remind text groups that we use, and a lot of you are already in them, so you probably got text messages about today's event as well as other ones. If you're not on them already, there is a careers in government or government careers, I forget the exact title of that one, Remind group. And then for SFS students, we have there's 10 different Remind groups based on specific major and interest. And then for those who are undeclared, there's a general one. So if you are interested in those, we can give you information a little later on how to get on those text alerts. The other benefit of that is it's literally Beth and myself that are sending the messages, so it's not a spammy kind of thing where you're getting a bunch of unwanted messages. They are literally being typed by us. So if you get a text message from us, know that we're real people. So be careful when you're responding. And you can also use the service to ask specific questions about some of the things that we send out too. So we enjoy that.
Yeah, and I like the Remind because oftentimes we'll get like an urgent message from like an alumni or someone else being like, I have an information session tomorrow and nobody's signed up, and it's like for a really like desirable employer, and so we tend to use the text messages for like those. Okay, we don't have enough time to get it in a newsletter, and we don't want it to get lost in email, so we're going to send you a text to your phone. So.
Yeah. And then the final thing is just signing up for, and we'll get other resources, but signing up for some of the job boards that we find to be the most useful for this particular group. And that includes Brad Travers, District Daybook, I think it was Link Tank, and there's a few other sort of DC specific job boards that you should sign up for in addition to using Handshake.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of gets to the next point too, is in addition to the resources which will be in this that we'll send you all, the other great thing, especially now that y'all are back on campus, is getting involved. So for example, if you're interested at all in the world of politics, and I mean politics in its biggest sense, go to GU Politics stuff. They do some amazing programming and they get some awesome speakers. The fellows that they have every semester, which are bipartisan in nature and represent all kinds of different organizations, are people who are at the top of their game. and you get a chance to literally like sit down and have coffee with them, which is amazing. They also have a lot of really cool events that they do. Sometimes we'll work on things together, so we work with them on a lot, but that's like a great listserv to be a part of. They have student fellows that work with them to help do their programming. That can be a great opportunity to be active. I also say become a member of the YRs or the Young Dems, either for Georgetown has chapters of both, or in your hometown. So whether you're joining the just the regular Democrat, Republican, Green, Libertarian Party, or you're joining like a young chapter, like a Young Dems, Young Rs program, again, those are awesome because, you know, we only have a presidential election every 4 years, and that's when a lot of people get involved. But getting involved on the day-to-day when you're talking school board races and city council and, you know, county executives and things like that, that's when you really can get to know the people in the party. And if you're interested in becoming very involved in campaigns and politics and like congressional races, getting involved in your local political party is probably one of the best things you can do with your, what I'll call your free time. And then also, yeah, campus groups, like pick your topic that you're interested in and get involved. Like I know Georgetown does some really cool work with like sustainability. If you're interested in climate change and sustainability, get involved in like how is Georgetown using our energy and what we're doing to make our campus more sustainable. Or if you're interested in criminal justice, man, Georgetown has some amazing programs where we work with folks who are in the local and state area prisons and try to help them get their degrees. We do work in trying to help reduce recidivism. We got some amazing classes that you can take with professors who do this work. But campus groups is like your place to go, and especially since we've been away for 18 months, I know a lot of those are just getting started again for the first time in a while. And that's all seen as valuable experience as well. You know, it's not all about like, oh, I have to have an internship on the Hill. I have to have an internship with the State Department. I have to have an internship with this organization. What we're talking about on this page are all experiences that can also add to your resume and make you a competitive applicant that aren't quote unquote an internship or a job. So, all right, so some other helpful government resources. We will go through most of these in future sessions. The big one is usajobs.gov and their help center in particular. They answer a lot of basic questions as to like what is USA Jobs and how do I get started. Same with intelligence.gov and intelligencecareers.gov. These are both great overviews of the intelligence community. opm.gov is where every law out there about federal hiring is put, and it's detailed, and it explains like exactly why things are the way they are. It's really wonky reading because it is like, you know, very government focused and legalistic. But they also do some really cool webinars you can sign up for. So say you can't come to one of our sessions, they do routine webinars on like how to create a job, federal resume, how to use USA Jobs. They're aimed at a broad audience, so they're not aimed at students. So you have folks on these webinars that are like, you know, 50 and looking for a new career. The last thing on this page, fedscope.gov, this is basically a database that has all this data about the federal workforce. I say it's great for the data nerds, so if you're ever doing like a public policy project for a class and you want to know information on like, you know, how diverse different parts of the federal government are or average age of people who work in the federal government, it's all there. And it's kind of interesting if you like that kind of stuff, which I do, so yeah, I'm qualifying myself as a data nerd. Tina,
And one of, yeah, well, really quickly, back on the previous slide, one other thing, as well as on the OPM website, you'll also see the pay scale for the GS or the GS scale. This is helpful when you're deciding where you should sort of fall when you're thinking about what your salary will look like. It'll give you really detailed information on which step you would be at and what the salary range is for those positions. So a lot of times if you're making decisions between public and private sector, that can help you figure out where you fall, or if you want to, where you should start, where your offers come in, and even as some different agencies have more flexibility with where your salary lands than others.
Okay, so some non-government resources.
So there's bestplacesToWork.org. I'm going to, in a little bit, put some of these links directly in the chat, or you can sort of go to them yourself. But I mentioned District Daybook, so Daybook Jobs is here, Politico, The Hill, Time on the Hill, Travers, which was the Brad Travers jobs. We do have a subscription to that. If you go to Cawley, there's a link to how to get access to these jobs because some of these do require a fee, including the you'll see monthly fee. There are some job boards there. District Daybook also has a fee, but there's a lot of things that you'll see there that are actually free that you can access. So some of the ones that usually require you to pay are jobs that are really high level. So I don't think you need to worry about paying for things like that now.
And like something like Tom Monato's jobs, I think the fee somewhere between $5 and $10. So you figure you buy 2 Starbucks coffees a week, and that's $10 right there. Daybook jobs, they've been having so many postings lately that they've often had like a month free premium or up to 3 months free for their premium subscription. So they have stuff you can access for free, and then they have the premium content. But like I said, they've seen anytime there's a transition in the administration, there's a lot of movement in DC in general. So a lot of the DC specific job boards right now offer various free months, free weeks. So, if you use it correctly, like at a good time, like when you're really in the middle of your job search, you can have access for free. And I'll send out the password for Travers Jobs. That's the one we do have access to as a university.
And we actually, in SFS, we have access to District Daybook jobs. So if there's a job that you can't access, please email it to me, and I will open it up and send you the details that
Yeah. Great. All right. So one last thing that we wanted to cover before we open it up for any questions is the role of networking. So, a lot of the rules for broader networking apply, but I think being mindful of where we are in DC. Like I said before, this is a one business town. That business is government, and the way you get stuff done in government is through politicking. And so a lot of the field, but not everything, is getting to know people and knowing the right people in the right place at the right time. So how can you get started? I mean, if you're on this call and you're a freshman and you're like, where do I start? You start with who you know. You talk to your professors. Our professors at Georgetown are probably the greatest underutilized resource that we have. And why do I say that? One, a lot of these people have been out there and they have done the jobs that you want to do, and they know what's involved, and they know the day-to-day, and they know people who are still working in these offices. And a lot of them also sit on as chairs of various groups, whether it's they sit on a panel that advises the president on certain types of policy, or they hold a research chair with one of the local think tanks. Professors, going to their office hours, are a great way to get started to know what's going on in the community.
And a lot of times, when we talked about we may get an alum or faculty referral for positions or internships, we get them directly from faculty members. I have some faculty members who, with one particular organization, every time I get a job, it's from a professor. So they want to share this information with you and are eager to talk to students who have an interest. If you don't let them know, they won't know to share it with you. So you really need to your job search is not a secret.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other way you can go about this is talking to former bosses and coworkers. So if you've had internships and stuff in the DC area, talking to those folks, as well as using any family and friend connections. I mean, if you know people who have jobs in areas that are interesting to you, it's totally okay to reach out to them and chat with them. I know that some students are sometimes a little loath to do that, but I'd say if you have that in your toolbox, go ahead and use it. And whenever you meet with someone, you should always ask 2 questions. Nothing else, 2 questions. One is, what are other organizations I should be researching? So if you probably have a couple organizations in mind, but there may be other government or agencies that do similar work, or nonprofits or NGOs that do similar work that you've never heard of that these people know about. And the second question is, with whom else should I speak? So try to walk away with the name of one organization you've never heard of and one name of a person to connect with. Because it's often not that first person you talk to who gets you a job. It's someone three steps down the road. Every job I've had, other than my first job, which I found out about at a career fair when I was a senior in college, every other job I've had has been through networking. And it's been through folks I've met volunteering. It's been through alumni clubs. It's been through friends of friends of friends. And especially in this town, like it really is who you know. And also to that end, don't limit it to just folks who share your political persuasions. You'll find this town is much more bipartisan than you may see. So say you hold really strong views on a particular social issue, be open to talking to someone who holds the opposite view, because a lot of times these folks all work together. They're bumping into each other on the Hill. They're bumping into each other at like events at think tanks. They know each other, and there's a certain camaraderie, and they often will know folks maybe that hold a more sympathetic view to what you believe and can point you in that direction. And that's where like our GU fellows with GU Politics is really awesome. And I know some folks who've been surprised at the opportunities that have opened up to them through talking with some of the fellows.
And just bear in mind, and this is a general networking tip, networking is the long game. You're not going to have one conversation with a person and walk away with this great job opportunity. That's not how it works. It has to be a lot more natural than that. And I usually tell people to think of it the same way as you make new connections and new friends. You don't sort of walk up to strangers and say, hey, stranger, give me something that I need. Like, that isn't a thing that happens. So it's not as transactional as some people sort of think it is. It definitely has to be more natural, and it comes from having conversations. You also have to build trust, because you're asking them to connect you to people that they know or to opportunities that they know about. And if they don't know you very well and don't trust you, they're less likely to pass that information on. So this is not a one conversation transactional sort of situation. It will be longer term than that. And you should sort of go into this thinking about a long term plan for networking with people and building a solid network versus just asking for jobs.
All right, a few other things. Tina, I'm going to let you take this slide. I've got to step away for just a moment.
Absolutely, no problem. So, to that end, one
Oops.
of the oh, sorry, okay, one of the best things about being a Hoya is our alumni network. We have hundreds of thousands of alumni around the world. And what they offer is the opportunity to be connected to a number of industries and a number of opportunities. You can use Hoya Gateway, which, if you've heard me speak before, you've heard me talk about it. If you haven't, this is the first time. Hoya Gateway is fantastic because it is literally a network built up of current Georgetown students, alumni, as well as faculty members and staff members. But with the alumni that are on Hoya Gateway have specifically said, I want to help students. What I usually tell students to do is find the person that you want to connect with on Hoya Gateway and then go over to LinkedIn. You'll go to LinkedIn and find other Georgetown alumni. You can do searches in LinkedIn on with an organization or an agency that you're interested in, and then do a search. And if you just put Georgetown as a school, and I usually say put Georgetown and then different variations of the school. So you'll put MSB, you'll put the college, you'll put SFS, you'll put sort of the law school, and you'll find alumni pretty much everywhere. Those are the people you want to start reaching out to, because alumni are eager to help you, because either they were helped when they were a student, or they wish that they had thought to reach out to people as a student. It's the other, I usually say alumni love helping, because it's one of the few times that the university reaches out to them and we're not asking for money. So they are eager to help you in that way. There are different alumni groups. So in addition to Georgetown alumni, go to your high school alumni associations, especially for those of you who went to schools that have a really strong alumni association, alumni base. You want to utilize that. When you're doing the same searches in LinkedIn, also search for people who may have gone to your high school. If you've gone, even if you haven't gone locally, think about what those alumni are doing in this sphere. And if you can connect with them, it gives them more of an encouragement to help you, because they feel like, well, they went to Georgetown, that's a great thing, or they went to my high school, I feel connected to them, and it helps them to want to do more to help you. Um, Also, following the experts, we've talked about thinking about the different groups that you can belong to, and what should you research, or what organizations should you follow that you may not, but also see what they're reading, see what they're writing about, what organizations do they belong to, and that will help you to decide, is this an organization I should get involved in as well. And finding people behind the kitchen sink, I'm going to leave that to Beth, because I have no idea what she meant by that.
So this is a saying of my 101-year-old grandmother before she passed away. She always she used it in the context of dating, and she always said, you're going to find your spouse behind the kitchen sink. I didn't get what she meant for a long time either, but eventually I figured it out that she meant like you're going to find the people you're meant to find doing the normal everyday stuff. So like if you're, you know, if you're going out and you're on a kickball team on the mall and you play every Tuesday night, you're going to meet people at that kickball game that might end up becoming friends. Or if you volunteer through your religious organization or church or synagogue, like same thing. Or you meet people, like, you don't see this happening quite so much because people are plugged into their phone, but like when I first moved out here, I knew of a lot of people who met because they rode the metro every day together to like the same stop, and they'd keep on bumping into the same people, and then eventually somebody would ask someone out, or ask someone to go to coffee, and like stuff would happen. So that's where it's like some of the networking happens naturally as you start. And I think it'll be easier now that we're back on campus. Some of this will become more organic and more natural, even for those of you who are like, oh, I really don't like networking. So that's what's meant by behind the kitchen sink, is it's kind of a means you find them in the everyday.
And I literally gave this advice to my student appointment right before this session. I told her to go join a running club, or and just the things that you want to do, because DC is sort of this town. You're going to find people with similar interests in working in government, no matter what you're doing. So it could be a knitting club, a running club. It could be next door or the neighbors app or something. You're going to find people that have some common interest and where you can connect with them. And again, that will make it more of an organic and natural connection versus I am coming to you in this transaction. So I think that that's actually great advice.
Yeah. And I did see a note from a question about finding paid internships in government. That's where sometimes these conversations are helpful, because we are in a world that I'd say it's 50-50 if it's paid versus unpaid. And that goes for whether we're talking about federal agencies or working on the Hill or working in nonprofits or advocacy groups. There's more movement towards paying interns, but it's a slow motion. There's stuff that's happening in laws and executive orders that are in the works to try and make it a mandate. But there's a lot that needs to happen between an executive order being issued and it actually ending up with money in your bank account as an intern. So in the meantime, having these conversations with people, learning like, you know, who has the money, typically, you know, like organizations and you know, agencies where they're getting more budget appropriations tend to be ones where they can sometimes offer payment. But I mean, it is a world where, like I started out saying, people don't come to this for money. The same thing, like it's hard with an internship. I know when I was in college, I really wanted to work on the Hill and I really wanted to work for the State Department, and I could not do either internship because I was paying my own way through college and I could not afford to live in DC and not make any money.
But there
So,
are
you know,
opportunities
it
too
happens.
for paid fellowship opportunities or internship stipends. It doesn't hurt to ask about stipends, especially travel stipends to get to and from the
Mm-hmm.
internship. And there are some different funds that you could be a part of too. I know the SFS students have access to the Pelosi Scholars Program, and there are similar ones on the website, on the university website, that will show you different ways to get funding for unpaid or low paid internships. So there are opportunities to help fund that if you have to do an internship that isn't paid. And then also thinking about the people specifically on the Hill who are also fighting for paid internships. So if you're interested in working for like AOC, you know she's going to pay because that's sort of one of her platforms. And so follow people who support that, and those are some of the people who you know will have paid internship opportunities as well.
Yeah. That's a good question. And we'll also try and get into that as we're going through each of our sections over the next few weeks, and like which, you know, to our knowledge, which organizations are paying or not paying. I know there's movement underway to try and make it a law that the State Department pays their internships, which would be amazing. But even still, there are some opportunities the State Department offers for those who receive federal financial aid. So, like, there are those options out there that we can always talk about too. All right, so any before we totally wrap up, but any questions from everyone? I know we're almost hitting an hour, so I appreciate your attention. Um, any questions before we get started?
And this is time you can feel free to unmute if you just want to ask it versus typing. Um, if you have questions, and there's never any question. A lot of times students think that my question is very specific to me. It may benefit the greater group too, if you're someone else may have a similar question. But while we're waiting for those to come in, we'll talk a little bit about what to expect in the coming weeks. Again, this is a part of an 8-part series of getting in deep with different parts of government and different opportunities within working in public service. Next week, Beth is going to go over the federal government or the executive branch, how to navigate USA jobs and the monster that is, and just how to sort of get into the missions of the various agencies, what day to day working looks like there, and then all about the IC and how that can be pretty tricky, including security clearances, what to do, what not to do, what the expectation is, how you should be very careful in your search there
I'll
because
give
you
you,
want
I'll,
to. Yeah,
yeah,
go
I'll
ahead.
give you a preview. If you smoke pot, stop smoking pot now if you're interested in the intelligence community, or if you misuse any kind of prescription drug, or you drink too much and you're under 21. Knock it off right now.
Yeah,
And we'll talk more about like what does that mean. It's not a disqualifier, but that's my sneak peek for the security clearances.
yeah.
Yes, and yeah, Luca, I will be sending the PowerPoint. It might take me a day or two to get it together because there's a couple links that I want to make sure are included. And I also will include the information on our funding sources, some of those, again, which are internal to the university, but then also external. Like, there's a great organization out there called College to Congress that works to try and help students find funding for congressional internships and is working really hard to try and make that more of an even playing field, or pay our interns is a nonprofit too that was also started by a student who lived in DC and couldn't get an unpaid internship, so he decided to create a nonprofit to address that, and now he's speaking with Congress people every day about the need to put out like national intern payment mandates. So it's kind of, yeah, those are
Yeah.
both good organizations to follow too.
So and we'll be meeting here every Wednesday at 1. All of the other sessions are in Handshake, so you can go through and see which specific ones. Again, you don't have to attend all of them, but I think there's a benefit if you do. If you find ones that just are more of an interest, go ahead and join them. But the ones that maybe either if you have a conflict or you're thinking, I'm not sure about that, we'll have recordings and the PowerPoints available after. It's just better if you can attend in a moment, especially if you may have questions. So we want to
Yep.
make sure we're able to address those.
But feel free to spread the word, tell your friends. Go ahead and when I send the deck out, like share some of our websites. Like I said, really a lot of what we'll be covering is really going into depth on what is on those websites and going through some of the resources and websites in real time and clicking through links and giving examples. And you also have access if you're an undergrad. You have access to me at the Cawley Center. If you're at SFS, you can talk to Tina. If you're in like McCourt or the law school, reach out. We'll put you in touch with the career centers at the graduate schools. But we're really here to help demystify this world. So thank you for joining us today.